Hi, I'm Jason, just Jason, and welcome to today's story time. Today's story time is brought to you by PNC and the City of Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture. Today's story is called The Voice of Freedom, Fannie Lou Hamer, Spirit of the Civil Rights Movement, and it's written by Carole Boston Weatherford and illustrated by Ekua Holmes. It's being read to you by the incredible Erica Williams. Take it away, Erica.
Voice of Freedom, Fannie Lou Hamer, Spirit of the Civil Rights Movement. Written by Carole Boston Weatherford, illustrated by Ekua Holmes. Sunflower County, Mississippi. Minister Malcolm X once called me the country's #1 freedom-fighting woman. But nothing about my beginnings would make you think anyone beyond these parts would ever hear my name. Mississippi. I was born here, the youngest of 20 children. My folks, James and Luella Townsend, were sharecroppers in Sunflower County in the Delta, where the soil was as rich as black folks was poor, where cotton was king and Jim Crow was the law. When I was born on October 6, 1917, the plantation owner paid my mother $50 for producing a future field hand. The money helped my family through the winter. Child, I am proof that the Delta birthed the blues. Delta Blues. I was just 6 when I dragged my first bag down a row of cotton. My family, all 22 of us, worked in the field. Wasn't no other work to do. They didn't have no such thing as factories. These factories are something new. From sunup to sundown, dew to dark, can't see to can't, 24 stacks over our shoulders down miles of rows, we bent to plucking the cotton blossoming out. As 100-degree weather heat beat down our backs, the dried bristles cut our knuckles and wrists, we picked 15 tons of cotton a season, but couldn't get ahead for our lives. You see, the scale was always tipped in the owner's favor. Our so-called share of the crop never be enough to pay back the money we borrowed from the owner for seed, food, clothing, and supplies. Same sorry situation every season. Black people work so hard and we ain't got nothing to show for it. I told anyone who would listen, sharecropping was just slavery by a gentler name. The same folks still had us in chains. I was the baby and my mother never let anyone in the family forget it. She told my father not to beat me, and she made my sisters and brothers give me piggyback rides, even though I weighed more than some of them. I could get into some mischief too, like the time I cooked a bag of rice. It boiled over and made a big mess. My father was so angry that I ran off to get away from him. My mother saved me from a beating that time too. My father wasn't always serious though. After a long day in the field, he told jokes. We roasted peanuts and all sang together. Sometimes they'd stand me on the kitchen table and I would break into this little light of mine. I reckon I was a show-off. My mother taught me. A strong woman. My mother wore rags, patched with rags so her children could look decent. Even as a girl, I knew things weren't right. Whites had food, clothes, everything, while blacks worked and went hungry. One day I asked, why wasn't I white? So that we could have some food. Don't feel like that, my mother said. We are not bad because we're black people. Next thing I knew, she had brought me a black doll. Told me, I want you to respect yourself as a black child. And as you get older, you respect yourself as a black woman. If you respect yourself enough, other people will have to respect you. My mother taught me years ago that black is beautiful. Fair. School was open 4 months, December through March, when children were not needed to tend cotton. I liked school even if black history was left out and the textbook made blacks seem like fools. I recited poetry and won many a spelling bee. Fair. May I have a definition? Free of bias, dishonest, and injustice. Fair. F-A-I-R. Fair. I sang too, up through 6th grade, and then left to work full-time in the fields. My family needed every hand if we were ever to break even. At 13 years old, I picked 300 pounds a week, but I missed my school books. I gathered newspaper scraps along the roadside and magazines from the plantation's trash just to have something, anything to read. I was so hungry to learn. My mother drilled this into me. When you read, she said, you know, and you can help yourself and others. Not much food and rarely meat on our table, often greens with gravy or onions with bread or cornmeal. Neighbors gave my mother chitlins, pig feet, and hog heads for helping with the slaughter. Our beds were cotton sacks stuffed with corn shucks and grass. We had no electricity, heat, or plumbing, and no money for a doctor to look after whatever caused this lump or to save my mother's sight when a wood chip hit her eye. Once, my father managed to buy a wagon, plow, and 3 mules, Ella, Bird, and Henry, and 2 cows, Mullen and Della. But a white neighbor poisoned the livestock. Just couldn't stand to see black people getting ahead. That knocked us right back down to doggone dirt poor doing without. My parents never did get a chance to get up again. I sure did miss Della's milk. Not everyone could move up north. Hardship after hardship wore my father down. By the time I was 22, we had buried him. Most of my brothers and sisters moved up north, hoping for higher pay and a better life. I can't blame them. Jim Crow chokes every chance a black man gets down here. Who wouldn't long for something better? I might have gone too, but my mother needed care. I couldn't bear the thought of her in some nursing home. She was in her 80s, nearly blind, and worn down by hard work when she moved in with me. Sometimes I read to her. Other times I'd hear her singing. Songs that would really sink down in me. Powerful message songs. I never regretted staying behind. Not a single minute. Not a single note. Worse off than dogs. I married Perry Hamer, Pat as he's known, a good man of few words, steady as a rock. My last name changed, but little else. I joined Pap on the Marlowe plantation, where he drove a tractor. I just picked down different rows. I canned produce, Pap shot rabbits and squirrels, and we caught catfish and perch. On the side, we ran my father's old juke joint and sold bootleg liquor. We never went hungry, but we were still poor. We couldn't stand that Marlowe's dogs, oh, honey, had its own indoor bathroom, while me and Pat used an outhouse because our toilet stayed broken. The owner wouldn't fix it, said we didn't need it. Besides picking cotton, I was the timekeeper. I tracked hours worked, bales picked, and paid owned. But the boss fixed the scales to cheat us sharecroppers. When I could, I used my own scale to set things right. When I couldn't, the lie weighed on me heavily. Motherhood. In 1954, me and Pap adopted 2 little girls. I sang spirituals to Dorothy Jean and Virgie Ree, just like my mother had done to me. In 1961, a doctor tricked me into an operation supposedly to remove a growth. I awoke from the surgery to find that the doctor's knife cut more than a small tumor. He had removed the parts that God gave me to bring children into the world. I would never have babies of my own. A Mississippi law at that time said poor folks had no business making babies. That law may have taken my womb, but no one was going to take my voice. Literacy test. In 1962, my friend Mary Tucker told me about a meeting at William Chapel Church. 4 young men from out of town was pushing voter registration. Not a soul sitting in the pews had ever cast a ballot. Till then, I didn't even know that blacks could vote. When the people would get out of the fields, if they had a radio, they'd be too tired to play it. So we didn't know what was going on in the rest of the state, even much less in other places. But my hand flew up when the men asked for volunteers to go to the county courthouse and register. In all, 18 of us signed on for the trip. I was just curious to go, so I did. I guess if I had any sense, I'd be a little scared. But what was the point of being scared? The only thing they could do to me was kill me. And it seemed like they'd been trying to do that a little bit at a time, ever since I could remember. A old rented bus drove us 30 miles to Indianola, what was the home of the violent white Citizens Council. Barking dogs and rifle-toting men met our bus. That was supposed to scare us. The city clerk only let 2 people in the courthouse at a time. I went first. I didn't know what to expect. I had to give my name and workplace, and then read copy and explain parts of the Mississippi Constitution. I didn't know nothing about the law. No wonder I flunked the test. Now at least I knew that voting was my right. On the move. On the ride home, a policeman stopped our bus to arrest the bus driver on an account of the yellow bus looked too much like a school bus. A phony charge if you ever heard one. We emptied our pockets, scrapped together $30 toward the bogus fine. Back at the plantation, my boss had already set my stuff in the road. Said they wasn't ready for that in Mississippi. He gave me a choice: withdraw my name at the courthouse or move on. All I could say was, I didn't go down there to register for you. I was down there to register for myself. Later that night, I left my home and family to move in with the Tuckers. But before long, night riders came around. They shot in the house 16 times, thinking I was there. I couldn't risk the Tuckers' lives. For 2 months, I moved from place to place, hiding out with friends and family. Then I rented a house in town near my family. Soon as I moved in, I marched back into that courthouse and retook the test. What did I have to lose? There was nothing they could do to me. They couldn't fire me because I didn't have a job. They couldn't put me out of my house because I didn't have one. There was nothing they could take from me any longer. A month later, I heard that I had passed. The price of freedom. Before I could cast a single vote, I had to pay a poll tax I couldn't afford and dodge the night riders who cruised slow as molasses past my house with guns after my name was printed in the paper. Too bad a voter registration card couldn't pay the rent. When Pap lost his job, we got by on $10 a week, raised by those young voting rights workers who opened my eyes to the change a-coming. I hopped aboard that train. SNCC. Those young folks was something else. Most belonged to SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, what was called SNCC for its initials. The college kids saw me for a leader. I made it plain why I joined the movement. All my life I've been sick and tired. Now I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I toured the South with words from my heart and spirituals I learned at my mother's knee. I fired up many a rally. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. But I wasn't singing for no show. I was singing for freedom. Leadership came natural to me as singing. People took to calling me the spirit of the civil rights movement.
That was part 1 of the Fannie Lou Hamer story. The Civil Rights era was a time in American history where people used different ways to fight against inequalities and injustices in society. What civil rights issues are important to you in today's world? Fannie Lou Hamer was a famous civil rights activist. Do you know the names of any famous civil rights activists in history? Join us next time for part 2. I'm just Jason. See ya!